Hello and welcome to Founders Amplified, where we spotlight underrepresented founders who are driving innovation and impact across various industries and sectors across the globe. I'm your host, Narayan Kulkarni, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Today's guest is Anna Insam. Anna Insam is the founder of Clio Health. Originally from a family of Austrian heritage and now based in Cape Town, South Africa, Anna identifies as a female entrepreneur, a gender-based violence survivor, and a women's rights activist. She holds a bachelor's degree in media from the University of Cape Town and an honors degree in strategic brand communications from the Vega School of Brand Leadership. Her startup, Clio Health, is a digital assistant that helps women and families manage their healthcare. From routine checkups to once-off events like fertility, surgery, or pregnancy. Clio has attracted investment from the Delta, a European South African venture builder, and was selected for the Draper Founders Program in New York, which took place in June 2025. Anna is on a mission to empower people in their bodies and minds, and Clio is her way of achieving a positive impact at scale. So, now that you know a little bit about Anna, let's dive in to the conversation. Welcome to Founders Amplified, Anna. It's great to have you with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking really forward to our conversation today.
Same here. Again, thanks so much for being here. And let's get started with our first question. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. And can you tell me about what led you to become a founder? And if there are any particular moments or experiences that sparked that decision?
Great question. Great starting point. So I think for me, I live in South Africa and my family is Austrian and both my parents were doctors. So I had a very unique upbringing of having sort of health on demand and having a built-in companion. Whenever I had any question, do I take the HPV vaccine, for example, I had a very unique access. So I didn't really realize the value of that growing up. And I think something else that I've recently really reflected on is that I was raised to believe that I can do anything, which often with women is something we struggle with, is not seeing ourselves as able to be founders or, able to be in strong leadership positions. And I think I'm really blessed that my father raised me in a certain way to make me believe that I can do anything I set my mind to. And when I got older, I unfortunately became a survivor of gender-based violence. So I saw firsthand what it was like to be disempowered in my body as someone who was so empowered. And I really think it was the mental strength and sort of self-belief that I deserved more that allowed me to walk away, take action legally, but to remove myself from a negative situation, fight back in a legal sense, and take my power back. And I think those experiences led me, after I'd worked at a venture builder for a couple of years, to really feel that I want to contribute something positive to the world, and also believing that I had the abilities in order to create meaningful change. So I think everything sort of came together and I discovered the problem that I wanted to solve, which is really centered around women and their families, and understanding that women are often managing their own health as well as family health, and that they are so overwhelmed and they now have careers and family and nothing has really changed in that sense, and they have all these responsibilities and they don't have enough support. So I really became passionate about almost seeing women who are struggling with the same things I was, and I wanted to be a catalyst for that change. So that led me to starting Clio and becoming a founder.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing. I mean, from what you were sharing, I received your perspective on power, for example, and having power and like seeing how like it interfaces both in, for example, like being a woman, like being a part of a medical family, also like and how that worked in being a venture builder. And also something that resonates as well is so as you probably know, and I talked about this in episode 0. So my mom and my older sister are both doctors. They're both very strong female role models. The first person that gave me an internship, the people that welcomed me into the field of healthcare administration were all women, and so I very much appreciate and applaud the role of women leaders in healthcare. And so I appreciate like I don't have not heard as much from people who are like, so for example, give an advocacy perspective like you do, if one wants to call it that. And I appreciate, and also like, I don't see as many, unfortunately, in my local context, women who are becoming founders, although that's increasing very, very significantly. And I like very much welcome that. But so I appreciate I'm receiving from you like that multidimensional aspect of power, and I appreciate that. And particularly, I want to next hone in on women's health because you talked about, and I think as you and I know, as our audience knows, women's health is a very, very important area. It has been a very important area, unfortunately underaddressed, but it's growing in prominence, nuance, and there's so many different people who tackle women's health in so many different ways. So, can you tell me about the unique perspective that your identity and your story give as to you as a founder in the women's health space?
Mm. I think what's unique is that I understand the problem that I'm solving, which a lot of the time as founders, you don't have that benefit. So having that strategic advantage, when I'm looking at our product, I think, would I pay for this yet? Does this meet the need? I can actually walk through the experiences myself, and really understand the pain points. And I think that that feeling of that women feel, which is just feeling completely overwhelmed and like, I don't even know where to start with my health. I've got all these responsibilities. I'm not sure how to tackle this. I think being able to understand that feeling of disempowerment and that feeling of overwhelm, which, health is very emotional, I've learned. So I think being able to have that unique perspective is really helping me build a product that's a lot more empathetic and that speaks to women, which, as you've mentioned now, is that it's not something that is sort of baked into historical context. So there's a lot of room these days to actually start focusing on it and, speaking to women in ways that they receive information in the right way, like packaging it in a certain way, I think is really part of it as well. So I'm really just feeling that as an operator, it's really adding value to that journey, and that the customer is really feeling that as well. With the feedback that we're getting, is that they feel the companion that Clio offers, they feel that they can trust Clio. These are huge statements to be making in healthcare, where often there's a huge distrust of women and doctors, or there's a huge distrust with information on social media. So I think it's allowing us to enter the market in a very unique way that I'm not seeing elsewhere. And I think that's a very special thing. And you obviously understand that feeling as well, having grown up around powerful women yourself.
Thanks so much for sharing. And yeah, to your point, I think I was lucky in the sense that I had a mom who was an OB-GYN, and then like she had, and also like I had
Mm.
family members who were also pediatricians. So like I had that access and like awareness of like healthcare knowledge. And I also
Mm.
did lots of pediatrics projects very early into my career in health administration. And so like I've had some small inkling of that understanding. But to your point, many people, especially many women, don't. And as you've also mentioned, there is a significant distrust for many different reasons in terms of power, the way the healthcare system's been created, et cetera. And then to the last point, which I really appreciate and that I received from what you shared, was empathy and from their perspective, and to reduce that overwhelm, in addition to, of course, giving them that sense of autonomy, power, that sense of like being able to claim their voice in that way. And I appreciate hearing that those dimensions are what I'm hearing those dimensions as very important to how Clio empowers and allows women to do what they do in health. So thanks for sharing those aspects. Now to the next point, and so this is the perfect segue to my next question. So, I mean, there are lots of different healthcare apps out there, which like I try to address like healthcare from like a patient perspective, from like a doctor perspective, from like an administrator perspective. But can you tell me something about what Clio Health does to approach care that challenges how people normally think about healthcare apps?
Mm. I think healthcare is often very scary. So, as a consumer who needs to go and receive or request healthcare, there's a lot of like delaying or not taking action out of fear. So you tend to see that the stats are that 50% of women skip or delay essential appointments every year. And that's just a crazy number is to think that like really the fear and the overwhelm is what's keeping them. So for us, I think being able to, we enter the market at a very interesting point of saying like, we're going to cut all of the clutter out and we're going to just tell you based on your age, your gender, and specifically around you, what we suggest you should be doing and what appointments we suggest you take forward for the next 12 months. And we also provide some optional appointments. So, things like fertility checking, that's becoming, more and more popular, but it's not exactly essential to what, the US would recommend as a screening guideline, like for breast cancer. So I think we come in this very empathetic way there, where we're able to you start right at the beginning, which is like I don't even know where to start. And Clio, you can actually just download and you can start that journey and just take that first small step where, okay, now we're on a journey. I've got a few appointments that I need to get done. And, then you're guiding her along it. So I think it's that guidance that really is very different. I think a lot of the complaints we hear about the US healthcare system is being very fragmented, or when you change jobs, you have to change healthcare providers because your company was paying for that provider. So very fragmented and feeling like just a number, etc. So I think Clio kind of removes that as the entrance point and says, well, you can actually start this at home in a safe space. You can decide what you want to do. You can educate yourself and then actually take that step at your own pace as required. And you decide what you do. So instead of it being like you must do this, the user is in control of those decisions. And I think when you're starting all the way at the entry point, it's very interesting to see how much more comfortable someone becomes. And I think a lot of the current competitors, they treat health as like, women's period tracking, which is extremely valuable, but it's only one element of who we are. And Clio is a lot more holistic. So we're really focusing on physical, mental, mind, body, soul. And, we may have similar features such like these other apps have, but we're coming from annual health, and annual health looks different for everybody. So we want every woman and man and child to feel welcome and to feel like it's a place that can support them and their unique elements of health. So I think that entry point, as well as just feeling like this is personalized for me, is very unique, as well as that general health perspective.
Well said. Thanks so much for the. I really appreciate what you just shared, particularly about some things that resonate with. And I think about this in the multidimensional sense, right? So there's like going on a health journey that can be very, very challenging and difficult, as you've talked about from a health system navigation perspective, from a personal autonomy perspective, as you've talked about from a woman's perspective in the world. Also, on top of that, like there are many different dimensions of health, as you've talked about, and I appreciate as you shared, like Clio brings in all of those, and I think, and as you've rightly pointed out, in the femtech market especially, there's a lot of differentiation around like a particular feature or like a particular aspect of women's health rather than taking it holistically. And then finally, as to your point as well, it's like yes, women's health, but it's also like their husbands, their children, other people in their family, their daughters. So yeah, like I also appreciate like that aspect of understanding like the family unit as well. But also to your point, and something that you mentioned was um, that the very vast amount of women who I forgot what the exact stat was. I think you said it was like 50% of
50%.
women.
Mm.
Um, right. So, and I think like it's of course, and to our listeners, because we have an international audience, it's important to contextualize that within where you are, right? So, I, for example, live in the U.S. You, for example, live in South Africa, but like there's very vastly different realities in like South Africa, for example, where they're like very, very powerful urban areas, but also very rural areas. Same thing in the US. Like I've lived in both very like suburban, but also very, very rural areas. And like that number can fluctuate drastically. And on top of that, of course, cultural aspects of healthcare. So like in each of these ways, why I really appreciate the aspect of the journey and the holistic part is because it certainly does it sounds like take into account those elements, which I think oftentimes are not considered enough in healthcare when it's very much about the mechanics. As you talked about, like a laundry list of following these recommendations and doing all these things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you're just touching on now is that, health is really different for everybody. So, if you're looking at a woman who is trying to fall pregnant, she may go and decide to do, vitamins. She may decide to do homeopathic, routes. Not every person is going to choose the same thing. So Clio is there to guide, but not force a user to actually, take steps that they don't align with. So we want to be very inclusive, I think is a great word, to say
Mhm.
that, we offer what, there's a lot of research behind women's health. Obviously, more needs to be done, but there are screening guidelines. We do have stats where we know that certain screenings are saving lives and are a great idea. But we want women to be able to just add any appointment. So from Botox, if it's anti-aging, through to, facial care, whatever it is that matters to her, she should feel that she can put that into Clio. And I think that's the personalization as well, that, you're never being forced into a box and you're seen as a person with all these multifaceted elements to you. And I think as women, that's something from an empowerment perspective, or at least from a confidence perspective, is being able to embrace all sides of ourselves is something that I think is a really special thing that I hope will come through in the product that we create.
Thanks so much. Now, I appreciate, for example, you giving the example of Botox or like facials because, and I say this having worked in healthcare, at least in the US system, um, those are seen as like cosmetic like appointments and things which are typically not reimbursed in many contexts. Often like medical dental integration is like a topic in the US. So when those systems and like vision, those are like very fragmented things, but it sounds like Clio is incorporating those from the perspective of what the woman user wants. And so I appreciate that. Like, I just want to bring that perspective because I think that's also really important to think about how that interfaces with the broader healthcare system. Now, to point about inclusiveness and to the point of personalization, I'm sure that that journey looks very different for every individual. And I know you've like had many beta users. I think you've had 30 beta users. So I'm curious what some of the learnings or feedback has been from those beta users so far, considering that like you're trying to make it inclusive and personalized at the same time.
Yeah. So when we were planning our go to market, we were trying to figure out which is the best in to go in, because annual health and general health is applicable to both you and I. It's not only, limited to women, it's not limited to a certain age group. As people get older, they become sicker as well, leading to more appointments. And what we learned is that women in their 30s, as they get into the stage of wanting to fall pregnant or potentially considering freezing their eggs, they get a little bit more invested in health than they were before. And they finally have a little bit of money where they're able to actually afford, elective things as well. And they're taking more ownership of their health. So we decided to focus on women in their 30s, and they're all based in Cape Town as well, just so that there was a similarity there. And there are upper class in Cape Town, which would be similar to most of the US market as well. Obviously, the purchase power is higher in the US. But we wanted to have like quite a representational group. And the group that we've got, essentially, they've got either they're all feeling overwhelmed. They might be starting a fertility treatment, or they may have just general health that they're managing, where they've got endometriosis or something that they are, going for chronic medication or continuously having to go for blood tests every few months. They do general health, but they have something extra on top of that. And what we've learned is that these women can have up to 30 appointments per year because of general health, because of illness, irregular test results. If you get an irregular pap smear result, you have to go back. You may then do fertility treatment. You may fall pregnant. So, the volume really intensifies there. So we decided to, focus on women who've got that particular concern. And we are focusing on these appointments because none of, I would say, the competitors that currently they're using period tracking, etc., or an insurer offer tools that support those appointments and the journey that they're already on. So what we've learned is, on average, women activate about 6 appointments. So the general health that I mentioned and that you spoke to. So you've got your oral hygienist visits, you've got your OBGYN, then you may add, therapy, etc. There's a set of appointments that they do, that they put on their to-do list. And we're seeing a lot of custom appointments coming up. So like we said, the personalization. And we also have a feature that is note-taking to help women prepare for appointments. And 85% of our notes on the app are linked to appointments because women are preparing for those appointments. They know that they're only going to have 10 to 20 minutes with their doctor, and they want to make sure they're getting the most value out of that expensive or stressful experience. So they are feeling a lot more empowered having this clear companion that's with them, that cares about them, and that knows their unique journey. So I think it's been very interesting to learn that the features we've got, they are loving. They just want more from us. And I didn't expect that to happen so quickly. I thought it would take up to 3 months of being, these users using it. But because they have these needs of appointments, the frequency of using the app increases because of those reasons. And we really now have a list of about 6 major features that are going to be coming. And I think being able to understand where they need extra help still along that journey that I've mentioned, from plan through to execution and completing an appointment, is excellent. So I'm really over the moon to have received that from them. And I think it's clear that women do want Clio, which, ultimately we're trying to validate. We've got an MVP. It's the first time we're putting a solution in users' hands to say, does this solve the problem? Are you feeling better, less overwhelmed, more accomplished? And we're seeing a lot of positive signals. Obviously, it's early and there are going to be certain, barriers that we are going to experience and drop-offs, etc. But I think as launches go, as a beta launch goes, I'm really satisfied with the results we're seeing and believe that our next version, we're going to really be able to satisfy their appetite of what they are needing Clio to do, obviously before the long list of roadmap features will come into play.
Wow, it's amazing to hear that the progress you've had and the what you're aiming to do and develop with the app. But now I'd like to zoom out a little bit. So it sounds like you've had a very great beta
Mm.
test so far. But let's zoom out to 5 years into the future, let's say. So what would you be seeing in 5 years in the lives of women and families, assuming that Clio is successful and that you continue along the trajectory that you're envisioning?
Mm. I would see like a woman, she wakes up on a Wednesday morning, her companion notifies her something positive to start the day. She either is tracking something like her period, certain symptoms, ovulation, whatever, that matters to her. She wakes up with Cleo as that supportive, encouraging companion for her day. She feels like life is easier with Cleo by her side. She's reminded that she has an appointment today. She's already prepared for that appointment. We make the logistics and organization as easy as possible for her. She arrives and she has less anxiety around that appointment. Afterwards, she's able to take action. If, the doctor said, we need to see you again in 3 months, she doesn't actually avoid that next appointment because it wasn't so bad. She feels like, okay, great. She goes back to work, she completes her workday. Potentially in the evening, she's got elderly parents, her son and her husband, and she's also coordinating their care. She's able to make sure that she's on top of everyone around her, where she feels like, I'm doing everything I need to as a great mom with the responsibilities that she does inevitably carry at home. But she also feels like, I'm thriving at work and in my personal life. And I feel like I can do this, and that with Cleo by my side, I feel that I've got the right support to make my dreams happen. And I think for me, it's just if she can feel empowered and less stressed about health and less chaotic, if it's one check off her to-do list, that's the future I envision with, of course, when her health is good and her mental state is good, her physical health is good, that's going to pour into everyone around her. So her family around her is going to be looked after. They're going to be happier, and ultimately that'll lead, to better workspaces, better personal lives, etc. So I almost see it that this beautiful waterfall effect happens, and encouraging then other women to be like, no, you don't need to be struggling with this. Just use Clio. It can support you to do the right things that you need to get done.
Well said. A beautifully articulated vision. Kind of on an aside. So when I was studying my health administration degree, we read a book called Well by Sandra Galea. This the very final chapter talks about a vision of for like a woman's life. There's a particular female protagonist who lives in the U.S. What her life would be like if all the important social determinants of health were addressed. And what you just shared reminded me of that. So I would encourage you, if you have any interest, can read Well by Sandra Galea, and the final chapter in particular. That might be of particular. And to this point as well, I appreciate that you implied but also touched upon implied multiple, but also touched upon a few social determinants of health, which Cleo does, it sounds like, interface with.
Absolutely.
Now, the next thing I know of, so in the introduction, as we talked about, so I know that one part of that, like your one milestone that you've reached, which you'll be like engaging with is the Draper House Fellowship in New York City. And so one thing I'm just curious about, so you live in Cape Town and then in New York City, and those are two very different but also like interesting locations to consider side by side. So I'm curious, I'm sure you've like studied, learned about like New York in addition to knowing Cape Town very well. What are some similarities and differences between those two markets and how they relate to Clio?
Mm. So Cape Town, of course, grew up in South Africa. So for me, ease of access, it's a great testing patch for many startups. Like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different segments, of people, rural, urban, etc. So, we're focusing on a city woman who is in her 30s for our go-to-market, and we're looking for similarities between the two markets. And I was very surprised when I did customer interviews in Cape Town and in just actually like random areas across the US because I was educating myself. I realized that what's very similar is that women feel overwhelmed. The attitudes and feelings around health and our bodies are very similar. I am speaking to a higher LSM in South Africa than the majority. So we are focusing on like the top kind of 3%, rather than potentially where in America our audience would be larger. And from a startup and more business perspective, it's important that there's scalability. And, I think the US offers us that. And New York, particularly, has a very high density, and a lot of health orientated businesses are really thriving there. So, we're not trying to convince people to care about their health with Clio. We are looking for people who already have an active interest in their health and that are on the journey. And we are going to join them, to encourage them and help them get the job done because it's a bit difficult. And that's very similar to the community that I see in Cape Town. So it's just kind of been the perfect storm where I think the Draper House was in New York. That's actually why I applied as well, is that I think having boots on the ground there, actually immersing myself in the culture and being able to speak, to New Yorkers one-on-one in person is going to give me that extra affirmation regarding our go-to-market as we're still working on those fine details. Whereas Cape Town is kind of a testing patch, but with the, I would say, high caliber of what the US expects of health tech, of health apps, of regulation, we've always been building for the US from day one because the sort of expectation in South Africa is a little bit lower. So if we build for the US, whatever we build for those women, we're able to translate very easily into the local Cape Town context. So I would say it's fascinating to even see a similarity because, like you said, it is so different. And it was only really through those customer interviews did I gain confidence in the similarities and that of the problem that women were experiencing and how transferable Clio can be. And, beyond even just the US, so the UK, just because there is the NHS, people still have a lot of frustrations where Clio could come hand in hand with dental, with dermatology, with cosmetic sort of procedures as well. So I think it's a great entry point for us. And we hope to obviously then expand into the US, going state by state, ensuring that we are complying with the right regulations.
Well said. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I appreciate your perspective. So yeah, for those who may not be aware or familiar with the U.S. market, yeah, New York is an extremely competitive market. So is California. To your point, Anna, yes. What's really unique about New York is there is an extremely high diversity culturally as well as economically in New York, and also there's a very, very high concentration of well regarded healthcare institutions of all types, academic medical centers, community hospitals, rural hospitals, interestingly. Some people may or may not be aware of that. So yes, I appreciate that you made those ones. And yes, to your point, of course, everyone I've probably like vast majority of people know, yeah, within the US, like New York is also one of the top hubs for entrepreneurship as well. So yeah, like appreciate your perspective on those. Now, zooming a little bit more onto like lessons learned, but taking a different angle. So you're obviously building in femtech, and you've like gone ahead and like obviously had a lot of really great progress so far. But what is one thing that you learned, or one truth about building in femtech that no one told you before you started?
I think when I began the journey, I was learning, Ida Tin had come up with the term femtech. So I started following certain, I'd say leaders in the space and women that I admired who'd built similar companies. And I found it actually very difficult to seek it out in the beginning. So my LinkedIn today looks very different to what it did back then. And in hindsight now, I realize based on conversations I've had, typically with, male investors or individuals who have never really thought about women's health, is they often see it as quite a niche market. And when you think that like every person on this planet has come from a woman's body, I mean, it's pretty insane that that is still seen as niche, and that, the magnitude of the problems that I think femtech solves is often, I would say, minimized a bit. And I even took that into consideration with how I've positioned the business, which is that, like, when I used to say to men at like a conference or, just in casual conversation, Clio is for women and their families, the first response would often be, what do you mean Clio isn't for me? Because I have the same, issues. So now with our positioning, we're very clear that like Clio is a digital assistant to easily manage annual health. And we try not overemphasize like the femtech element because of the way that it's often received. And obviously we are addressing the problem, but sometimes there's a marketing element to how you present information to get the right results and to get the right partners on board, or to make sure you don't alienate a male audience. So those are definitely considerations that couldn't have anticipated. And now that I see it, I see that you do have to be strategic with how you weave femtech into the equation so that it isn't yet another thing that's working against you as a female founder.
Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate you point that out. And I will say, like, I think, of course, like within like there are significant differences in like diversity within like female perspectives and male perspectives on femtech. I will tell you, as you probably know, like I was raised by like amazing women leaders. We've had multiple like femtech guests on this podcast. So like I, for example, am very receptive to aware of femtech. But yes, like the vast majority of men that I know are not aware. So yeah, to your point, like about marketing, it does remain a challenge. Although, as we've talked about, like femtech is a rapidly growing market with very, very like much needed innovation, and which is very exciting. But yes, to your point, like the marketing can be for the vast majority in the venture space who don't have that background or context really, really important. So I appreciate that you shared that perspective. Now, as we wind down, I have some last few questions. So how can people find you and how can they support your work?
So follow me on LinkedIn, I would say is the best. I love speaking about, women's health and how that impacts me from my perspective as a founder, but also what's happening in the industries and important debates around privacy and all of that. So I'd say that's a really great place to connect if you're passionate about women's health and what we're up to, as well as Instagram. So at Anna Insam on Instagram, I do a lot of behind the scenes content on what it's like to be a female founder and what, your week looks like. So if you're someone who's wanting to go into entrepreneurship, I really suggest following me there and connecting, because it's a little bit more unfiltered than LinkedIn would be. And then, of course, if you're interested in Clio, our website would be great to visit and sign up to our waiting list. As we plan our different launches, we'll let you know on email when Clio is available in your area as well. And yeah, that was it, hey?
Yep, that was it. And so to our audience, you'll see the information that Anna provided in the show notes. Now it's time for our signature question. Can you please fill in the blank? I amplify.
I amplify women's voices and women's health and make it an experience that is an empowering one every single time.
Wow. Well said. Very profound. And again, thanks so much, Anna, for being here on Founders Amplified and sharing your journey and insights with us. It was so cool to hear about the innovative approach you're taking with Clio and also the positive impact that's enabling. And I just want to pause and reflect on the conversation so far and like what you've shared. So first of all, I want to celebrate you for being a fantastic leader and inspiration to underrepresented people everywhere. But a few things that really resonated with me in our conversation were, so first of all, I appreciate that it sounds like you have different perspectives on healthcare, from like being like in a healthcare family to your own experiences, as you've talked about in gender-based violence, and then like also being a founder. So I appreciate that multidimensionality of perspective that you bring. I really appreciated the fact that you bring holism and empathy into the equation. And also, as you've talked about, I really appreciate the aspect that you are putting like families and really looking at healthcare from a community perspective as well as an individual perspective, as well as from your voice and for you've described it from both a blend of the like lived experience, empathy, and pragmatism, which I think is very rare and very needed among founders, but also just healthcare professionals in general. So I appreciate the presence and the perspective that you brought into our audience as well as into like women's health and healthcare more broadly. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Narayan. I've really just loved speaking to you today and just, I think, getting your perspectives. You've got such a unique perspective yourself, and as an underrepresented like individual as well, I think it's really special to be able to connect with you and to, have an understanding of your journey, and just a huge appreciation for all of the voices that you've had on the podcast so far. I'm really enjoying this journey, not just, sharing my own story, but learning from others. And I think that's something you're really bringing into all of our lives, which I'm deeply grateful for. So thank you so, so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you again so much, Anna. I look forward to staying in touch, and I'm sure you'll be doing great things in the near and far future. But I'd like to say goodbye for now. Bye, Anna.
Thanks so much. Goodbye.
To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Founders Amplified. I hope you're feeling as inspired as I am. If you'd like to learn more about our guest and support them, check out the show notes for their details. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating, share it with someone you know, and follow us for more inspiring episodes like this one. If you're a founder who is driving innovation and impact in any industry or sector anywhere in the world and would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Check out the show notes for more information. And finally, remember that you, yes, you, have the power to amplify the voices around you. Whether you're a colleague, family member, friend, funder, mentor, or just another fellow human, your support matters. So I invite you to celebrate and uplift the underrepresented innovators in your life who are driving innovation and impact. Let's create a better future for everyone, together. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep amplifying.